Welcome to the Season 5 of the India Energy Hour podcast. This podcast explores the most pressing hurdles and promising opportunities of India's energy transition through an in-depth discussion on policies, financial markets, social movements, and science. Your hosts for this episode are Shreya J., Delhi-based energy and climate journalist, and Dr. Sandeep Pai, Washington-based energy transition researcher and author. The show is produced by 101 Reporters, a pan-India network of grassroots reporters that produces original stories from rural India. If you like our podcast, please rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the platform where you listen to our podcast. Your support will help us reach a larger audience. The oil and gas sector in India has been a story of evolution from once private entities turning into nationalized companies, and then again the entry of private sector in 1990s. Initially, the upstream oil exploration sector witnessed a lot of private investment, but then it slowed down. The downstream oil sector simultaneously saw a variety of social schemes, billions of government funds, and private investment from marquee names. The natural gas sector, on the other hand, is a story where import dependence has only increased over the years, making the supply to key sectors, like power generation, difficult, since imported gas price cannot match the cost advantage of coal. At the same time, India is aspiring to be a gas-based economy. Mega-scale city gas distribution and piped gas network expansion is also under works. In the middle of this, ethanol blending program for petrol has taken off well. Simultaneously, a pilot project on green hydrogen blending with natural gas has also started in Madhya Pradesh. To unwrap the past, present, and what could be the future policies and plans for India's oil and gas sector, we talked with Jyoti Mukul, a seasoned energy infrastructure writer. Ms. Mukul was a journalist for nearly 3 decades and has followed milestone developments of the country's energy security and transition efforts. She is a well-known policy analyst for energy and infrastructure sectors, and her first book, The Great Shutdown, a story of 2 Indian summers, highlighting the infrastructure challenges posed by the COVID pandemic, came out in 2022.
Hello and welcome to the India Energy Hour. We have a very special guest today with us, at least special for me. This is a person whom I've worked with at least 8 years, has been my guide and mentor. We have with us Ms. Jyoti Mukul, who has been a prolific journalist and writer in the energy infrastructure space. I've had a very special journey with her. She herself had a stellar journalistic career, which saw some of the biggest milestone in this country's economic growth. So welcome to the India Energy Hour, Ms. Mukul.
Shreya and Sandeep.
Just before we delve into this very important issue that we will discuss, I thought that you could tell your journey on your own. I'm sure I won't do much justice to it. You were a journalist for more than 2 decades with a special focus on India's energy and infrastructure landscape. So can you share us about your professional journey? Where are you from? What did you study? Were you one of those accidental journalists, or was it a choice? And how did it fare covering energy and infra for so long?
So Shreya, back then, in 1994, when I joined journalism, of course, I joined journalism from a journalism school, that is Indian Institute of Mass Communication, from their Delhi branch. That time they had only Delhi, and then they were opening that year for Dhain Canal as well. So I opted for Delhi because I was Delhi based. And then when we graduated from IIMC, we applied for internships first, because 1 month of internship was required to get our diplomas. At that time, they were offering diplomas in PG diplomas in journalism. I was in the class of English journalism. And then instead of our internship, I and a lot of my batchmates, we got a job in a paper called the Asian Age, which was being launched. And they took some, if I remember correctly, a dozen of us into their fold. And that time we were pretty excited. And I got a salary, if I remember correctly, of a princely amount of 3,500. And I was so excited about that I thought, oh my god, what will I do with so much money? So then we joined Asian Age. And since the paper was new, I don't remember, was it already launched or was it launched after we joined? We had to work all 7 days of the week. And it was pretty grueling. So I joined on the desk of Asian Age, and after maybe 6 months or so, I applied in Financial Express. And that was the start of my career in business newspaper and as a business journalist. The I would say it was just a coincidence that I got a job in Financial Express, because Asian Age, when it was launched, it had the latest technology in printing and newspaper making. And I knew the software on which I could operate the software. I was doing pages there and making pages, giving headlines, and the other editing work. So I got job in Financial Express because I knew Quark Express. Nothing at that point of time was part a journalistic factor was in my CV, or except that I knew how to operate Quark Express quite well. And so I was hired. If he was introducing this software and all that, and for 10 long years, I was in FE. Then I moved to Business Standard. And after working there for some time, I joined DNA. From DNA, I went to Financial Chronicle. Again, Financial Chronicle and even DNA was a newspaper, new newspaper, and the Financial Chronicle was being launched, and I was taken in as chief of bureau because of my experience, and also because of the experience of handling a lot of beats. You would be knowing that to have a view of a lot of sectors helps in enriching the copies which journalists write. And therefore I was taken as chief of bureau, where I worked for about 1 or 1.5 year, I don't remember exactly. And then I was back to Business Standard again for 12 long years. Of course, I quit journalism in 2022, but journalism itself has changed a lot. As I told you, I was hired because I in FE because I could operate a software, and those were cut paste times. So there were no web editions of newspapers. There weren't videos or anything which print media was doing. So journalism has evolved a lot since back then.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing this. Um, I just wanted to understand, like, how you, as your career unfolded from the times till until 2022. Have you seen some historic events that unfolded your career? What were some of the key events that actually shaped your own thinking? And I think, and then your book came out and it talked about COVID and Indian infrastructure. So, if you can explain some of the events that had a major impact on your career.
So Sandeep, as a young reporter, I switched from desk job to a proper reporting job in 1997. Yeah, 1997. 3 years I was on desk. And uh, when I moved to it's people who are in journalism would know. And whether it's a newspaper or a magazine, the transition from being a desk person to being a reporter is not very easy. In fact, I believe in other countries, it's people become reporters first, and then they, go on to be in the desk. But that time in India, there's not much, thinking which goes into who will join a desk or a reporting job. But I would say I really learned a lot, and it helped shaping my career when I started off from the desk, learning how to edit copies, learning how to, give headlines, and which I think is a very essential part of print media. In electronic, probably the liners which go are important, but in print, it is very important to have good, correct, precise, and eye catching headlines. So, this is what I learned. I learned how to edit copies, and then I moved on to reporting. I started off by writing features on small and medium industry. At that time, the definition of small and medium industry also got changed, and Financial Express launched a full page on MSMEs. So what happened during that period was that because I was part of this team writing on MSMEs, I got a very good view of various sectors in which MSMEs operated. So one day I was visiting atta flour mill and writing about the different kinds of attas which are available. And then I was one day going to Saranpur and writing on the wood based industry, the carvings and the art which Saranpur offers in terms of wood products. So it gave me an training in doing ground based reporting, as well as going to the proper factory or a site to see what happens and then report back. Normally in a policy reporting kind of a scenario, which most of my career was, and Shreya has also done that, what we do is we go to the ministries, we talk to industry, and then based on their inputs we write. But this early stage training helped me in training myself in writing a narrative, which I think really helped my writing skills. And then when I moved to the Daily Bureau, my first beat was infrastructure, in which I was doing roads, railways, and shipping. And railway, as you guys know, is a kind of a microscope for the Indian economy. They move cargo, which is coal and food grains and cement and things like that, apart from the passengers. And therefore, it helps you to understand these commodities very well. Railway also helped me in knowing how to read a budget, because railway used to have its own budget earlier. It wasn't very exactly similar to the general budget, but the way accounting is done, government accounting is done, I was able to understand through this beat, railway beat. And then, of course, I started writing on energy as well when I joined Business Standard, I think in 2002, if I remember correctly. No, sorry, in 2004. Then we also, when I was in FE, I witnessed the dismantling of administered price mechanism in oil and gas sector. Now that was a very big thing that time, because a decision on APM dismantling was taken by the cabinet much earlier than the exact deadline was March 31st, 2002. It had to be dismantled. But there was lot of political, these decisions are very tough to give away the control pricing and go towards market pricing. So except for four products, which was petrol, diesel, LPG, kerosene. These four sensitive products, which Government of India call them, rest of the petroleum sector was decontrolled. And then it was decontrolled in the sense that technically the pricing, the companies were free to set their pricing, but government controlled the way they price the products, which is like they introduced this fortnightly mechanism of calculating price for diesel and petrol, and for LPG and kerosene it was done on a monthly basis. So they were indexed to a certain basket of certain international indices, and then every fortnight the price was to change. But they were not exactly changing also, because sometimes government wouldn't allow the companies, oil marketing companies which are government owned, to increase the price. This was done mainly unofficially. So that thing happened and happened, and it kept going on till 2010, when petrol prices were completely decontrolled, and the phase decontrol of diesel prices. Also, diesel, mind you, is more sensitive product when it comes to impact on inflation, impact on prices of other commodities. Therefore, diesel was done in a phased manner. And in 2014, when the current political regime came to power first time, they took the benefit of very low prices. So the phased increase in diesel prices ended up in 2014 to be a fully market driven price in diesel. But as Shreya and Sandeep, you will know that still a lot of behind the scene control of prices is done by the government. And later on, there was this daily pricing, and now there is no official declaration of petrol diesel price. Also, one another interesting thing which happened, which I saw and wrote about, was the direct benefit transfer in LPG, which happened sometime, if I remember correctly, in 2015. That was also a very major step, in the sense, instead of subsidized LPG cylinder, you were getting a subsidy in your bank account through direct benefit transfer, and certain consumers were not eligible for that. There's an income criteria. Anybody earning more than that in a year does not get this DBT benefit. So that was another. And if I look at the infrastructure side and my reporting career, there was a huge controversy when railway zones were created. Now people would say, "Oh, what's so controversial about it?" But it was a huge thing. And I remember Nitish Kumar was the railway minister then, and he was under a lot of political pressure, because there was a lot of resistance on creating more railway zones. So I think seven new railway zones were carved out of the existing zones, and I think this happened sometime in 2002, though the decision to create railway zones were based on a railway reforms committee report which came sometime in 96 or 98. So it took a lot of political, and there was a backlash from the railway workers themselves, who didn't want more zones to be created. So that was another thing, broadly, which I remember. Of course, roads, the roads were the build, operate, transfer. Roads were built on that model. That also happened during Vajpayee government. And I remember one of the first segment and a model contract was put in place when Jaipur Kishangarh was done. That was the legendary project which NHI awarded, and that contract became a model contract for other BOT projects. So road also, there was lots happening. So these were, I think, the big events during my reporting days.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think this sets the tone for us to dig into our topic for today, about the past, present, and future of the India's oil and gas economy. It has been 136 years since India dug its first oil in Digboy. But even after these many years and several policy initiatives, why are we not a powerhouse in hydrocarbon production? And in the same breath, if you can address that, why global majors have always shied away from the Indian market?
So Shreya, hydrocarbons, exploiting hydrocarbons under the earth, under your ground, is a very complex exercise. You could also say that it all depends on how naturally a country is endowed with oil and gas resources. Like for instance, India has good coal reserves. You know that you have written on coal and power yourself also, but we don't have. We are not so rich if I compare to coal. In that sense, we do have a lot of oil and gas, and lot of rounds of oil auctions have happened. We do produce. Bombay has a very good field which was discovered early on in India's oil and gas discovery. Of course, Dig Boy was long back, but then we have a lot of oil and gas coming from even our eastern area, eastern fields of Andhra Pradesh as well. There's a Rawa field of the coast of Andhra Pradesh. So similarly, there are pockets where oil and gas were found and were produced. But if we have to compare to say world's richest oil and gas countries, which are there in Middle East, and also US has also got good resources. We do not have that many resources as per the understanding, and a dollar invested in Middle East or in even in very rich oil and gas areas in Russia will probably give you more returns than they will probably in India, because you'll probably have to drill more, and the returns may not be enough. There's a concept in oil and gas exploration which is called marginal fields. Those fields are smaller fields where the reserve quantity and the production quantities volumes are very low. So sometimes big companies like ONGC would find them very not very lucrative to do business, because ONGC is a big company. The cost of production is probably higher, so they tried monetizing these marginal fields to smaller players who can give them better return, give them a share in the marginal feed production. Those kind of arrangements were thought of and in some cases done as well. So I would not say that we can be a powerhouse in oil and gas simply because we do not have so much oil and gas under our ground, and therefore the import dependence continues. And of course, now if I look at oil and gas sector, um, the interest, a lot of companies are moving, a lot of energy giants are moving away from these fossil fuels. So they are only marginally investing in these kind of they have taken a conscious decision that we will not invest in oil and gas. Some companies have started focusing only on natural gas and not so much on crude oil. So these kind of decisions are globally taken by some companies, and you know that they are transitioning to renewable energy. To if it was an offshore field, they are looking at offshore wind, from the same infrastructure which they have created. They want to put up wind turbines and use that for wind generation. So that the I would say that the outlook towards how to invest, or the investment outlook towards oil and gas, has also changed a lot from what we have seen in 90s and even in 2000s, where companies used to invest a huge amount in oil and gas.
Great. Very interesting how you explain the upstream. I just want to go to the downstream of things. So, if you can speak about like how India's refining sector evolved, I think it's pretty big. And what's the size, Is it still growing? Because India's appetite for all energy is growing. So just curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Sandeep, India's refining sector, yeah, and if you compare it to the upstream part, is a contrast in the sense that we have done pretty well in refining capacity, and we are exporters also. So so it's a very heartening story there. I think the refining capacity is somewhere around 57 or 58 million tons per annum now. Now the thing is that in refining sector we have seen that earlier, of course, there was dominance of PSUs, and dominance meaning they were there was the market was also not open to private players at that point of time. So a lot of companies post dismantling of APM in 2002 started commissioning their refining capacities. And then you had the biggest, of course, which came up in the private sector, was Reliance Industries' first refinery in Jamnagar. Later on, they commissioned another refinery in Jamnagar itself. SR came up with the Wadinar refinery. So there were private sector players who came in. And the PSUs also expanded their refinery capacity, did some greenfield refineries, also joint venture refineries, like HPCL methyl refinery in Punjab came up. So that's how capacities came up. And also one interesting thing, Sandeep, which happened in the refining sector is that refiners also branched out to petrochemicals, which is further downstream, and they added capacities there. So India does export a lot of petrochemicals as well, apart from petroleum products.
Right, but in terms of refining, we are pretty big. We are being called a refining giant, despite the bottlenecks in terms of reserves. How did this situation shape up? It's pretty ironic, or is it not?
So Shreya, what happened was that our refining capacities increased. It may sound ironic, but we import the crude oil. So a lot of the refining which we do in India, I think the percentage is about 80%. The crude oil comes from, we import it. About 20 or less than 20, we are domestically producing the crude oil. So it is an import dependent industry, the refining sector itself. So the thing is that refining now with both the domestic market, what is happening is earlier we used to import products as well, petroleum products, petrol, diesel, and especially LPG continues. Even now, we import some LPG, if I'm not wrong. But because we became so self sufficient in refining, and imports of products declined, and instead we became exporter of petroleum products at one point of time. And I'm not very sure, where we'll have to check the figures on that. Petroleum products were the biggest export products of India, in gems and jewelry. And they had beaten gems and jewelry, and they were, in terms of value, they are the biggest exports from India. So it may be an import dependent sector, but we were capturing the export market, and therefore the value addition which we do through refining helps us. It created jobs, it created a good situation for us in the trade balance. Those things happen. And also, oil marketing companies who are also refiners sometimes take a call. If the Indian market pricing is more beneficial for them, the product pricing, then they push more products in the domestic market. This I'm talking about private refiners mainly, because PSUs are obligated to sell in the domestic market. And if the private refiners find that their products are getting better price overseas, they push in the export market. So that's how it's working.
Right. Jyoti, I have one question. As you explain the landscape of upstream, midstream, and how they have evolved, like I have read and obviously I've followed how Indian government's fiscal dependency on oil and gas taxes and how big they are and so on. How did that happen? If you want to share kind of in some detail about what is this fiscal dependency? How does it manifest at the federal level? And are there any subnational or statewide dependency as well?
So, Sandeep, you're right. There is a lot of dependency, fiscal dependency on the petroleum sector. And the reason, of course, would be because of the high value items which are being, which are there in this sector. So whether it is ATF or petrol diesel, of course, is a common man thing, but there are also other refining products which are sold in the country. So these kind of things, of course, give government a good revenue. So there was a time when there was this whole debate on whether the taxation on petroleum products should be a fixed number or ad valorem basis. Ad valorem basically means a percentage of the price of that product is being taken as tax. So what used to happen was each time the price increased, and this happened more when the prices were slightly decontrolled and fortnightly price increase was happening. Each time the base price would increase, the percentage increase in government revenue would also increase automatically. Supposing it's a 5% or a 10% tax excise duty, then and the base price of the petrol and diesel increases, the government revenue would automatically increase. So I remember clearly it was P. Chidambaram in the as finance minister who introduced a combination of fixed tax value and an ad valorem value, a percentage value, both. So a certain portion of the tax excise duty was fixed in terms of rupee 1 or rupee 2, 3, I don't remember exactly how much. And then a certain portion of the excise duty was in percentage. So that's how the taxation was reformed, so that there's no cascading effect in the eventual price, and the benefit of high product prices does not unfairly go to the government as well. So that's how it was done. And if I understand correctly, globally also countries charge their petroleum products a lot of tax, and they are a good source of government revenue. Now when it comes to, say, state governments, you asked about subnational. So you know that five petroleum items, which includes crude, which includes natural gas, petrol, diesel, and ATF, they are outside the goods and service tax regime. So what happens is the states are charging their own VAT, and the union government taxes, charges an excise duty. So they are out of GST regime, and the states are not very keen to bring these five items into the GST regime simply because their revenues will be impacted. Come what may, the demand of liquid products like petrol and diesel roughly increases by 4 to 5% every year, and they are stable source of revenue for the state governments. In even in this whole energy transition, the thing about when people talk about energy transition, there is a certain concern on how will government finances pan out if fossil fuel is completely moved out. So that's another area of concern which some many flag when they talk about energy transition.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that. So, Did you have a sense of what the conversations have been, and is there any planning, long-term planning in this regard on like how do we manage such large revenues over a period of time? Because if India were to truly achieve a net zero by 2070, it's only 40-ish years. So yeah, how are the conversations going on that?
Uh, Frankly speaking, Sandeep, I have not come across uh, very serious planning on that account. That if India transitions to being net zero by 2070, then how what happens to the fossil fuel taxation and the loss of revenue to the governments? Because I'll tell you why. One, probably they are not talking about it, or governments are not talking, and I mean both the central and the state governments, they are not talking about it much because they know, and in a realistic sense, we all know that completely phasing out of fossil fuels may not be possible in a country like India, which has a huge population and is growing right now and will continue to grow. In countries which are smaller in size, probably it is easier. We are, the fourth largest consumer of energy. So, and you would have noticed that few years back, even in the power sector, there was a talk of phasing out of coal-based capacities, but then there was a sudden ramping up of coal capacities as well. So what we understand, it is net zero which is being talked of, and not really a phase out of the carbon intensive fuels. So in that, probably that's the reason that I have not come across much discussion on how this hole in the budget will be tackled, if at all if at all the country moves completely away from fossil fuels. One is that, and second, the other argument which many people give is that if assuming that we move out of the fossil fuel, fossil fuel usage completely by 2070 or later or even earlier, then there may be other sources of taxation which may come up, which because as businesses move towards friendly environment friendly practices, those practices also will have some amount of taxation, or will generate some economic activity which will indirectly contribute to government revenues. At this point of time, there are incentives and there are viability gap funding for RE, for renewable energy and other maybe sustainable practices. But if they become mainstream, I do not foresee that then that those incentives will continue, because once something picks up, logically speaking, the incentives are also phased out, right? So therefore the budget it will be like any other business. Probably sustainable practice will be like any other business, and sustainable technologies and generation of renewable power will like be any other business, so that will also generate probably revenue for the government.
Right. Thank you for addressing that. If I can now, shift the gear of the conversation towards the downstream sectors, especially the oil and gas retail market, which in last decades or last 2 decades has seen kind of a transformation. And if you can explain that, what kind of transformation the downstream sector has seen, and if you can also address what role did social sector schemes like, Ujjwala Yojana, etc., have played in that.
Yeah, Shreya, Ujjwala, personally speaking, if you ask me, is a very good was a, or is a very good program, because simply because it is providing access to a clean in the sense, I'm not talking about LPG production, but I'm just talking about the whole exercise of cooking, right? In a kitchen, when you cook, uh, it is a clean fuel in that sense for the person who's cooking. So in that sense, it's much healthier for that person to cook through LPG than any other coal or wood or any such fuel. So in that sense, it is good. And in a time when we are looking at being a Viksit Bharat, and we are aiming, big growth goals we have. Everybody should have access to energy sources, and I also believe that they should be able to make their fuel choice as well, right? So Ujula in that sense has really helped. Of course, price of LPG sometimes becomes, or most times becomes, unaffordable for certain families, and therefore government should give. I firmly believe, though there is a lot of climate activists will say why subsidize LPG? It's not good for environment because it's done out of hydrocarbons. But I personally feel that families that cannot afford to buy cooking fuel, it is our responsibility as a country, even if I have to pay additional tax from my pocket to the government for funding the cooking fuel of certain families. I think it is fairly okay by me. I would want that people should have an access to energy, and in that sense, I may sound very politically incorrect or whatever. I think some amount of energy subsidy, whether it is power or cooking fuel, is required for a certain section of the society. The only thing which we need to probably fix is the transparency in this whole exercise. How much is the subsidy? Whether the companies are being reimbursed by the government that subsidy or not, which sometimes does not happen. The backlog of subsidies from the government to government-owned companies is huge. It runs into crores. So that needs to be fixed. Now, coming to the other part of the downstream or the retailing of oil, petrol and diesel, or I would say the one scene which one thing I have seen is the number of players who are retailing oil, petrol and diesel change. There are private players also. They still are nowhere near where public sector companies are doing business in terms of selling petrol and diesel, even LPG. It's PSU dominated, but private players have entered. You can see private petrol pumps once you move out of bigger cities. So that is also a change one has seen. Of course, there are times when these because of the distress they feel in their business. Sometimes they have seen few years back or maybe a decade back, the private sector shut down all their petrol pumps because it wasn't viable for them to do. There was subsidy. The PSUs were being subsidized, and private sector could not compete. So that has also happened in the petroleum sector. But largely, I would say that in terms of energy access, whether it's petrol, diesel, LPG, we uh, we have done fairly well. We've never faced shortages as such.
Right. I want to move to another interesting topic, that at least from a global point of view, it's of deep interest, which is, India's LNG imports. As you know, like I've again like come across that has massive plans to import more LNG, and also because there is very sluggish domestic production. Is that a good strategy to be more dependent on foreign imports of LNG? Shouldn't India just focus on coal, or rather clean coal, if there is such thing called clean coal, rather than depend on another set of import fuels?
Uh, Per se, Sandeep, personally, if you see, and my perspective on this issue of being import dependent, I think it's we live in a world right now. Of course, there are a lot of trade issues, and which is something world has probably never seen earlier. But otherwise, largely, if you see the world over, people are dependent on imports for something or the other, right? Now, of course, coal is there with us, and coal gives a kind of assurance to us that okay, we have coal, and we will not get, we can generate our power, we can run our cement and steel plants, and all that coal will be available. But there were coal shortages also, right? We had to restart import of coal last year, if I remember correctly. So it's not that, and if I look from an energy perspective, and as I mentioned earlier also, I would love to have a basket of fuel available easily, whether it is through imports or through domestic sources. So dependence on one particular fuel is not the right thing to be there. So if we are talking natural gas versus coal-based power generation, we are largely coal-based. We generate a lot of RE also now. So in that sense, we are not dependent on just coal. But to have gas-based power plants, and there are power plants in India which had to, basically dismantle their machinery because they didn't have natural gas with them. So it was more a question of price than availability, I would say, Sandeep, because LNG could not compete with the coal-based power generation. So if you from a purely business point of view, it didn't make sense for them to generate power through gas LNG imports. At the same time, there are certain captive LNG plants which are okay, which are viable for the users to take power from them and produce whatever they are producing. So my answer, a short answer to your question would be that of course we are dependent on import for natural gas, and as we are for crude oil. So it is that import dependence will be there, but we should keep all our options open, I would say.
Right. One of the major demand drivers for LNG and these estimates that keep coming about our growth in energies could mostly be driven by what the country is betting on in terms of CNG and PNG. CGD sector has been a game changer for clean fuel availability in the country. But the sector's growth in itself has been sporadic. It's been restricted to metro towns. There are PNG network in the country remains very very urban. So what are the challenges that this CNG PNG sector faces in the country, and despite so much push, why the growth has not been so explosive?
So Shreya, CGD is a business which, of course, in cities like Delhi and Mumbai and parts of Gujarat have been now are very accustomed to using the CGD network, and for them it's not a really new thing. But overall, if we see CDGs, uh, they are a fairly new. It's a fairly new sector for in terms of fuel accessibility. But it is convenience. It is more modern, and certainly it should be there. Now, any business, not just CGD, but any business will work depending on the demand. So, if I look at what you said, urban and rural phenomena, the reason why certain they call geographical areas when they give CGD rights out to companies. The Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board gives GAs out, geographical areas out. Some certain geographical areas they gave out, and the whole industry and the government was very gung-ho about it. But what happened was that the demand wasn't there much. So, like any other business, it's more demand driven. So, investment in CGD infrastructure was in fact in natural gas it is said it's a chicken and egg case. If you do not have a infrastructure in place, a pipeline in place, or a CGD network in place, then demand may also not come up. At the same time, to justify to make that infrastructure viable, you need a certain base load or base demand, which in certain areas, especially when it comes to piped natural gas for domestic areas, the population density outside of big cities is less. So therefore, these GAs find themselves uh, in bit of a spot because the number of connections is not as high to justify investment in the CGD network. But I think by and by, a certain amount of market play will come into action, and also there's a whole demand to look at some kind of a subsidy or a viability can funding or for the CGD network, or in fact there's also a demand that the subsidy available for LPG as a cooking fuel should also be available for piped natural gas, because piped natural gas replaces LPG. So that subsidy should be available to them. So that those are the dynamics which are working out in this sector.
Fantastic. Now let's move to the new clean fuels. So I want to start by asking, what do you think would be the impact of EV deployment in India on natural gas applications like CNG or oil products like petrol? Like, is there a long-term trajectory or pathway that has been explored?
So you are right, Sandeep, that they are competing fuels. CNG, when it came, it kind of wiped out a certain amount of market share of diesel in cities like Delhi, because public transport by a Supreme Court order had to be on CNG. So a certain amount of demand came down, but later on it picked up. So it was competing with diesel, and then CNG also, CNG penetration to answer Shreya's add on to the question Shreya asked earlier. Coming up of CGD networks also brought down of the consumption of diesel and people switching to CNG. There's a price advantage for CNG compared to petrol. And then there was you would remember there was auto LPG also, which is was at one point of time very extensively promoted, but that it really didn't catch up much. So auto LPG was also competing with CNG, and then we now have EVs. Now, my assessment, there's no trajectory as far as government modeling is concerned, or in even automobile companies. I don't think have any clear idea of which will pick up more, CNG or EV. But EV has a certain convenience, despite me saying that EV charging stations are not very widely available. We You would realize that even CNG stations are also not available. And unlike CNG, EVs can be charged at home. In fact, EV models come with the charging chargers which you can fit at home and charge a vehicle. And some new building codes require buildings to have charging points for EVs. So certainly that advantage of convenience is there in EV. And but I don't see CNG going away so easily, because there are lots of doubts, still in consumer mind for EVs, which I think in case of CNG, it has been taken care of. Especially in NCR region, the whole public transport is on CNG. Their buses are coming up in electric as well. But the demand itself, overall, if you see Ola, Ubers, and all, they are also running CNG, and they are inducting electric vehicles as well. but I have not seen the lines at CNG station coming down. There are still long queues outside CNG stations.
That's quite interesting. On the this whole broad idea of new fuels, I want to discuss something that is making headlines for so long, yet a concrete. I'm not sure concrete action or something to hold on is still visible to us, and that is these new age fuels like green hydrogen and methanol. There are pilot projects happening. There are big commitments being made by the companies, the government, etc. At what stage do you think they are? Let's start with green hydrogen. What kind of promises does it hold?
So Shreya, green hydrogen is still a long way away when it comes to green hydrogen based mobility. There are models which Toyota launched for green hydrogen, and then there are of other models as well globally, which are looking at green hydrogen. There are two technologies in green hydrogen run vehicles. One, of course, is the electric, green hydrogen based electric vehicles is there. So, but I don't think it will be able to supersede the demand for CNG vehicles or EVs, the non-green, non-hydrogen EVs. That is, I think, a long way right now.
What about ethanol? The government also has a very ambitious ethanol blending program, and if the reports are to be believed, we have met our targets, and now we are much more ambitious in that. And second, now these other fuels are being talked about. Fuels from biomass, methane, methanol. What do you think of that?
So ethanol, of course, 20% blending is what we have achieved in petrol. Ethanol is blended in petrol. So there are ambitions to scale it up further. And at a number of retail outlets, the petrol pumps, already E20 fuel is being dispensed. Sometimes the consumers don't even come to know that the petrol which is being filled up in their vehicle is ethanol blended E20. So that is already happening. There is the whole ambition to move to higher than ethanol. At some point, it requires the change in vehicle engines. E20, of course, does not require. So, a normal vehicle can also run on E20 petrol. But at a certain stage, if we want to do 100% blended fuel, or then there I think there are requirements. There are actually views on it, differing views on it, whether the engines of the automobiles are required or not, because countries like Brazil are already doing a lot of blending, and 100% also they run on blended fuel. So that is an idea there. But one interesting thing which I should point it out is that ethanol blending happens at a certain price level. If oil prices come down, or not oil prices, if you say petrol prices, crude oil, not crude oil, but petrol prices, the production cost of production petrol is less than what sometimes is less than what, at the price at which ethanol is available to the oil marketing companies. So that then it becomes a play of competition between ethanol and the normal petrol. So only at a certain price point it makes sense for a oil marketing company to go for blending. Of course, the government mandates come with a must do, so they have to do it. But also, price is also one factor which will come into play here.
Wonderful. This has been a really great conversation. I just want to end with one last question, which is are you working on another book? I've read your first book, and I wonder if you're gonna explain about all these evolving energy policies, energy landscape in your second book. So just curious if anything is on the works.
Yeah, Cindy, I wish I was working on a second book. Uh, I'm not, but I do have certain ideas in mind, and maybe at some point I will turn it into a book proposal. You're right. On energy, I have not written. My only book right now is one on lockdown, and that too. Uh, Many books have come on COVID per se, but I tried to look at lockdown from a very infrastructure reporter, if I may say, point of view, because I felt that it may sound very simple, but shutting down of transport services is a big crisis. We all have seen and gone through that crisis. So I wanted to capture that in my book, and also the whole we don't want to remember the COVID times, because many families witnessed tragedy, and it was tough time for all of us. Companies cut salaries, and people were inside their houses, and a lot of stress levels high. Nobody wants to remember, but I wanted to record all that was happening, mostly in India, the government measures. So idea was to capture the government measures, the impact of shutting down for this vital segment of infrastructure called transport, various modes of transport, and that's what I did. It was a very simple book, and not very complicated in terms of writing it. At times it became a little monotonous, because capturing government decisions, and they are routine decisions, not routine in the sense because COVID wasn't routine and neither was lockdown, but very banal kind of government decisions and their impact. So I just wrote it. It was very simple to write. um, a book on energy, of course, would be very interesting, and I do have some ideas in mind, but I ideas don't write a book. Time does. You have to have some time on your hand to write also, right? So maybe I would. I also sometimes feel like writing a fiction, which has been in my mind for some time. So let me see what I'm able to churn out.
Maybe a energy transition fiction. That could combine both. But thank you so much. This has been such a rewarding conversation for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandeep.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a great conversation, and I hope whatever the next book is comes out soon. The first one, The Great Shutdown, was absolutely great. Covered something that most of us, didn't focus on. And thank you again for joining us here at the Indian Energy Hour. It was a fantastic conversation, and thank you again.
Yeah, it was lovely chatting. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the India Energy Hour. Subscribe to this channel to never miss an update. To drop us a feedback, visit our website or write to us at theindiaenergyhour@gmail.com. We are on Twitter. You can follow at TIEH_podcast and get in touch with the two hosts at Shreya_J and at Sandeep Pai.